The artificial morning light slowly brightened in Lieutenant Jack Mason's quarters aboard the Galactic Coalition training facility. The space station orbited silently around Proxima Centauri, home to the most advanced military training program in the known galaxy. Jack rolled out of his bunk and stretched his muscular frame, already feeling the subtle difference in the gravity settings. The station maintained a standard 0.8 Earth gravity in common areas, a compromise that most species found tolerable if not comfortable. Jack began his daily exercise routine with measured movements. 50 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and a series of stretches that kept his Earth-born muscles from weakening in the lighter gravity. He had been aboard the station for just 3 weeks, but already his presence had caused ripples among the other trainees. Humans were newcomers to the Galactic Coalition, their homeworld only discovered 18 years ago. Earth's classification, as a Class 5 Deathworld, had earned humans immediate respect, tinged with wary curiosity. As Jack finished his workout, a soft chime sounded from the room's communication panel. The station's AI spoke in a neutral voice. "Lieutenant Mason, please report to Commander Zilthrak's office immediately." Jack wiped sweat from his brow with a small towel. "Acknowledged. Please inform the commander I will arrive in 10 minutes. After a quick shower, Jack put on his standard-issue Coalition uniform, a simple dark blue jumpsuit with the Earth insignia on the right shoulder, alongside the Coalition's universal symbol on the left. He checked his appearance in the mirror, making sure everything was perfectly in order. First impressions mattered, especially when you were the only human in the training cycle. The corridors of the station buzzed with activity as beings from across the galaxy moved with purpose. Jack nodded politely to those he passed, noting the variety of protective gear many species wore even in the controlled environment of the station. A group of Melnarians shuffled by in their pressure-regulating suits, their large eyes blinking rapidly at Jack from behind transparent face shields. Commander Zilthrak's office was located in the administrative section of the station. The door slid open as Jack approached, revealing the imposing figure of his commanding officer. Standing nearly 7 feet tall, Commander Zilthrak was a veteran Versidian officer whose chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the office lights. His compound eyes studied Jack with unreadable alien intensity. "Lieutenant Mason," the commander's voice clicked through his translator. "Please sit down." Jack took the offered seat, designed to accommodate multiple body types. "You wanted to see me, Commander?" Zilthrak's mandibles moved slightly, and what Jack had learned was a sign of concern. "There appears to be a mistake in your equipment requisition for today's tactical exercises. Our supply officer reports you have not requested any combat armor." "That's correct, sir." "I don't require armor for the scheduled drills," Jack replied calmly. The commander's posture stiffened. "Lieutenant, perhaps there is a misunderstanding about today's exercise parameters. The simulation will recreate conditions classified as Deathworld Level 3 with variable gravity, atmospheric pressure changes, and simulated environmental hazards." Jack maintained eye contact, or what passed for it, with a species that had compound eyes. "With respect, Commander, I understand the parameters completely. Earth is classified as a Deathworld Level 5. These conditions will be less demanding than what I experienced during basic training back home." A sound like small stones rattling against each other emerged from Zilthrak, a Versidian expression of surprise. "This is not about proving your physical superiority, Lieutenant. Combat armor is standard protocol for all Coalition forces during exercises of this caliber." "I'm not trying to prove anything, sir," Jack explained. "Humans train without armor whenever possible. It builds our natural resistance and adaptability. Armor would actually hinder my performance by restricting movement and dulling sensory input." The commander studied Jack for a long moment. "This is highly irregular, Lieutenant. No other species has ever attempted these drills without protective gear. Permission to speak freely, sir?" Zilthrak made a gesture of assent. "Humans evolved in an environment that forced us to adapt to changing threats without technological assistance. Our greatest advantage is not our strength or endurance, but our ability to function effectively in diverse conditions. If I'm going to represent Earth in these exercises, I should do so using the natural abilities that make humans valuable to the Coalition." The office fell silent as Commander Zilthrak considered Jack's words. Finally, the alien officer tapped a command into his desk console. "Very well, Lieutenant. I cannot force you to wear armor if you believe it compromises your combat effectiveness. However, you must sign a special waiver acknowledging the risks. Coalition regulations require it." "Thank you, sir. I appreciate your understanding." As Jack left the office, he could feel Zilthrak's compound eyes following him. The commander's final words hung in the air. "I hope your confidence is justified, Lieutenant. Many will be watching your performance today with great interest." Word of the human's unusual request spread quickly throughout the station. By the time Jack reached the preparation bay, curious glances and whispered conversations followed him through the crowded space. Most of the other participants were already donning their specialized combat gear. Everything from exoskeletons to fully enclosed environmental suits. "Is it true you're going in without armor?" The question came from Lieutenant Kalara, an Aldebaran whose silver skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that reflected her emotions. Currently, those patterns pulsed with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Jack nodded as he checked his standard-issue training weapon. "That's right. But why take the risk?" she pressed, adjusting the settings on her own lightweight protective suit. "Even minimal protection would give you better survival odds." "It's not about survival," Jack explained, holstering his weapon. "It's about effectiveness. Humans rely on all our senses during combat. Touch, temperature, the feel of the ground beneath our feet. Armor creates a barrier between us and our environment." Kalara's skin flashed with patterns that indicated skepticism. "The Aldebaran philosophy values preservation of life above all else. Your approach seems unnecessarily dangerous." Before Jack could respond, the imposing figure of Bruthos, the Craxian squad leader, approached. Standing even taller than Commander Zilthrak, Bruthos's rock-like skin was further reinforced by a powered exoskeleton designed for extreme conditions. "So the Deathworlder thinks he's too good for armor." Bruthos rumbled, his voice like gravel even through the translator. Typical human arrogance. Jack met the Craxian's four-eyed gaze steadily. "Not arrogance, Bruthos. Different evolutionary strategies. Your people developed natural armor. Mine developed adaptability." Bruthos snorted through his breathing apparatus. "Theories and words, the battlefield cares only for results. We'll see how your adaptability fares when the environmental controls start cycling." The facility's training director, a veteran Juraxian named Drell, approached with a datapad in his three-fingered hand. His amphibian features remained professional, but Jack detected a hint of concern in his large, bulbous eyes. "Lieutenant Mason, I need your thumbprint on this waiver, acknowledging you understand the risks of participating without regulation protective gear." Drell held out the datapad. "It also confirms that this decision was made without coercion and against standard coalition advice." Jack pressed his thumb to the screen without hesitation. "Thank you, Director. I understand the concerns, but I believe this approach will prove valuable for everyone." Drell's throat sac expanded slightly, a sign of doubt among his species. "Perhaps. Or perhaps it will demonstrate why coalition protocols exist in the first place." He handed Jack a small monitoring device. "Attach this to your uniform. Medical will track your vitals throughout the exercise." As the final preparations were made, Jack found himself increasingly isolated. The other participants gave him space, whether out of respect or expectation of failure, he couldn't tell. Only Sergeant Pete Donovan, the only other human stationed aboard the facility, approached him before the exercise began. "Giving them the full Earth experience, huh?" Pete said with a slight smile, his voice low. Jack nodded. "Someone has to show them what we can do. Just remember you're representing all of us out there," Pete cautioned. "No unnecessary heroics." "Standard protocol," Jack assured him. "I'm not here to show off, just to demonstrate our natural capabilities." The preparation bay's announcement system chimed, and a synthetic voice addressed the participants. "All trainees report to simulation chambers. Exercise begins in 5 minutes." As Jack joined the procession toward the chambers, he felt the weight of expectation on his shoulders. This wasn't just about one training exercise. This was humanity's chance to prove their worth as coalition partners, to show that the latest species to join their ranks brought unique and valuable capabilities to the Alliance. He stepped onto the transport pad that would take him to the simulation area, standing tall among his armored counterparts. Whatever challenges awaited in the exercise, Jack was confident in one thing. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history preparing for this moment. The transport pad hummed to life, and the preparation bay dissolved around them. The simulation chamber hummed with energy as 16 participants materialized in a rocky, barren landscape. Twin suns blazed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the uneven terrain. Jack Mason felt the immediate change in gravity, approximately 7 Earth standard, and adjusted his stance accordingly. The air was thinner, too, with a slight metallic taste that suggested higher concentrations of heavy elements. Around him, the other trainees were already checking their armor systems and environmental readings. Their movements were careful and deliberate, weighed down by protective gear designed to shield them from the harsh conditions. Jack stood out starkly in his simple blue coalition uniform, unprotected and exposed. A disembodied voice echoed across the landscape. Exercise parameters. Capture and secure the objective with minimal casualties. Opposing force outnumbers you 3-1. Environmental conditions will fluctuate throughout the exercise. Mission begins in 30 seconds. Bruthos, the Craxian squad leader, moved to the center of the group. His heavy exoskeleton whirred softly with each movement. Form up, standard approach pattern Delta. Mason, take rear guard. Jack understood the assignment for what it was. Bruthos expected the unarmored human to be the weak link and was positioning him where he would cause the least damage when he inevitably failed. Rather than object, Jack simply nodded and moved to his assigned position. Remember your training, Bruthos continued. Stay in communication range. Watch your environmental readings. The first phase will test. The sky erupted with light as plasma fire rained down from concealed positions in the rocky outcroppings ahead. 2 team members went down immediately, their suits registering critical hits. The simulation had begun. Without warning, the first test was their reaction to ambush. Take cover, Bruthos bellowed, diving behind a large boulder. The team scattered, scrambling for protection. Jack watched their movements with a critical eye. They were slow, hampered by their armor and reliance on tactical displays rather than natural instincts. But Jack moved differently. Using the lower gravity to his advantage, he made a powerful leap that carried him behind a rock formation 20 meters away, a jump that would have been impossible on Earth. He landed in complete silence, feeling the rough texture of the alien rock beneath his fingers. With his unprotected skin, he could sense subtle vibrations through the ground, movement from behind the ridge ahead. Jack tapped his communicator. 3 hostiles behind the eastern ridge, moving to flank. Lieutenant Kalara's voice came through, with alarm. Mason, hold position, your scanner can't possibly… But Jack was already moving. With swift, fluid motions, he scaled the rocky formation, using natural handholds invisible to scanner systems. From the observation deck, Commander Zilthrak and Director Drell watched with growing interest as Jack's unarmored form seemed to flow across the landscape like water. Remarkable mobility, Drell noted, his amphibian eyes widening. Without the weight of protection, he's moving at nearly twice the speed of the others. Zilthrak's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. Pull up his vital signs. A holographic display appeared showing Jack's biological readings. His heart rate had increased only slightly, his breathing remained controlled, and his body temperature showed minimal elevation despite the exertion. The readings contradicted everything the commander knew about combat stress responses. On the simulated battlefield, Jack reached the top of the ridge and peered over. Below him, 3 heavily armed opponents stood in a defensive formation, their attention focused on the main group. They hadn't noticed the human above them. Their sensor systems were calibrated to detect armored opponents, not the minimal heat and electrical signature of an unprotected human body. Jack calculated his approach. In seconds, he slid down silently behind the first opponent, a simulated Dracalian soldier, and disabled it with a precise strike to its neural cluster. Before the other two could react, he was already moving, using the body of the first as momentary cover. Kyo, second opponent, managed to fire a shot, but it went wide as Jack dropped and swept its legs from beneath it. The third turned too slowly, its heavy armor preventing the quick reaction needed to track the fast-moving human. All three were neutralized in less than 10 seconds, without a single shot fired from Jack's weapon. "Threat eliminated," he reported, calmly through his communicator. "Eastern approach is clear." Silence greeted his announcement. Then Kalara's voice tinged with disbelief. "Confirmed. Our scanners show no active signatures in your sector." The team regrouped and began advancing toward the primary objective, a fortified installation visible in the distance. Jack rejoined them, moving to Bruthos's side. "Your tactics are unorthodox, human," the Craxian observed, a new note of cautious respect in his gravelly voice. "We call it adaptability," Jack replied simply. As they continued forward, the environmental conditions began to shift. The temperature dropped rapidly, frost forming on exposed surfaces. The armored team members' systems adjusted automatically, heating elements activating to maintain optimal body temperature. Jack felt the cold bite into his skin but welcomed the sensation. It sharpened his focus, triggering natural biological responses evolved over thousands of years on Earth's variable climate. The team reached a deep chasm blocking their path to the objective. At least 30 meters across, it presented a significant obstacle. Bruthos consulted his tactical display. "Scanner shows a crossing point 2 kilometers north," he announced. "We'll need to—" "There's a faster way," Jack interrupted, studying the cliff face. "I can climb down and up the other side to secure a line for everyone else." Kalara's silver skin flashed with patterns of alarm. "That's a 60-meter drop, Mason. Without safety systems, I can handle it," Jack said confidently. "Earth's gravity is stronger than this. I've climbed more difficult terrain during basic training." Before anyone could object further, Jack approached the edge and began his descent. His fingers found tiny crevices invisible to the others, his body moving with practiced precision. The team watched in stunned silence as the human descended, the sheer cliff face without any equipment beyond his own skill and strength. In the observation room, more officers had gathered to watch the unexpected display. Sergeant Pete Donovan stood at the back, a small smile on his face as his fellow human demonstrated what Earthborn physiology was capable of. "Is this typical human capability?" asked a wide-eyed junior officer next to him. Pete shook his head. "Mason is good, but not exceptional by Earth Special Forces standards. This is baseline performance for someone from a high-gravity death world." Down in the chasm, Jack reached the bottom and immediately began climbing the opposite wall. His muscles burned pleasantly with exertion, his mind clear and focused. Each movement was deliberate but quick, finding the path of least resistance up the rock face. Within minutes, he had reached the top and secured a climbing line for the others. "Path secure," he reported. "Sending up the line now." One by one, the armored team members used their powered systems to ascend the cliff. Kalara was the first to reach the top, her silver skin pulsing with patterns that Jack had not seen before. "You could have died," she said quietly, as she detached. From the line, Jack helped her onto solid ground. "But I didn't. That's the point. Humans assess risk differently. We trust our bodies and instincts over technology." Kalara studied him with newfound curiosity. "On my world, we have spent thousands of years developing systems to protect our bodies from harm. The idea of deliberately exposing oneself to danger is foreign." "Different evolutionary paths," Jack explained. "Your people sought to eliminate risk through technology. Mine learned to embrace and overcome it." Once the entire team had crossed, they continued toward the objective. The simulated enemies grew more numerous, their tactics more sophisticated. But with each engagement, Jack's unarmored state proved increasingly advantageous. He could hear approaching enemies before they appeared on scanners. He could feel changes in air pressure that indicated hidden doors or passageways. His natural night vision adjusted faster than electronic systems when lighting conditions changed suddenly. During one particularly intense firefight, Bruthos took a hit that damaged his exoskeleton's power system. The massive Craxian was suddenly immobilized, his armor frozen in place and exposing him to enemy fire. Without hesitation, Jack sprinted across open ground, using the lower gravity to make unpredictable leaping movements that confused enemy targeting systems. He reached Bruthos and physically dragged the Craxian, armor and all, behind cover. The feat would have been impossible on Earth, but here Jack's natural strength combined with the reduced gravity allowed him to move the massive alien to safety. "Power reset in 3 minutes," Bruthos growled, clearly uncomfortable with being rescued by the unarmored human. "We don't have 3 minutes," Jack replied, assessing the tactical situation. "Enemy reinforcements are converging on our position. For the first time in the exercise, Jack drew his weapon, a standard coalition plasma rifle. "Cover me," he told the others. Then, in a move that defied conventional tactical doctrine, he charged directly at the approaching enemy forces. The observation deck erupted in surprised commentary as monitors tracked Jack's progress. He moved so quickly and unpredictably that the simulated enemies struggled to acquire a lock. "The command center has 3 entry points," Jack explained to the team as they took cover behind a ridge overlooking their objective. "Main entrance is heavily guarded. Side entrance has fewer guards but better scanning systems. Roof access appears minimal but likely trapped." Bruthos nodded, his earlier skepticism replaced with tactical focus. "Your assessment matches my armor's readings. Recommendations?" Jack studied the fortress-like structure for a moment longer. "Environmental controls are about to shift again. I can feel the air pressure changing." He looked at his alien companions, their bodies encased in protective systems. "Your armor will protect you from the change, but it will also slow your reactions." As if responding to his words, the simulation generated a new challenge. The temperature plummeted dramatically, dropping well below freezing. Visibility decreased as swirling ice particles filled the air. The ground beneath their feet hardened, becoming slick with frost. The team's armor responded automatically, heating elements activating and traction systems adjusting. But Jack felt the full impact of the cold against his exposed skin. Rather than hindering him, the sensation sent a rush of adrenaline through his system, a natural response honed by millions of years of human evolution in Earth's varied climate zones. "Kalara, Bruthos, take 4 team members through the side entrance," Jack directed, his breath visible in the freezing air. "I'll create a diversion at the main entrance. The remaining 3 come with me to the roof." Bruthos's 4 eyes narrowed. "The roof is likely to be the most dangerous approach." "Exactly," Jack smiled slightly. "They won't expect anyone to try it." The team split as planned. Jack led his small group toward the rear of the facility, moving quickly across the frozen terrain. The cold had become intense enough that ice crystals formed on his eyebrows and the edges of his uniform, but his body had adjusted, redirecting blood flow to maintain core temperature, something no technological system could replicate with such efficiency. "How are you not freezing to death?" asked one of his team members, a sentry whose environmental suit was now covered in a layer of frost despite its heating systems. "Humans evolved in environments with extreme temperature variations," Jack explained as they reached the base of the wall leading to the roof. "Our bodies naturally adapt. The cold actually helps me focus." In the observation room, Director Drell watched with growing fascination. "Commander, the human's core temperature has dropped slightly, but remained within functional parameters. He's showing no signs of hypothermia despite exposure to temperatures that would kill unprotected members of most species." Commander Zilthrak's compound eyes reflected the monitor displays. "More interesting is his decision-making. Despite no tactical computer or enhanced sensors, his assessment of the target matches our most sophisticated analysis systems." Sergeant Pete Donovan stepped forward. "If I may, Commander, what you're seeing is something we call intuition. Humans don't just think with our brains. We process information through our entire nervous system. The lack of armor means Mason is getting direct environmental feedback that your systems can only approximate." On the simulated battlefield, Jack began scaling the wall toward the roof. Unlike his armored companions who used powered climbing assists, Jack relied solely on his natural strength and the lower gravity. He found handholds in the smallest imperfections of the wall, his fingers sensing minute variations in texture that allowed him to maintain his grip despite the ice. He reached the roof first and quickly identified the security measures: pressure plates, motion sensors, and thermal detectors. With careful movements, he navigated through them, disabling just enough to create a safe path for his team. Clear path marked, he transmitted to his companions still climbing. Follow my exact route. As his team made their way carefully across the roof, Jack found the access hatch. It was locked, but the mechanism was simple enough. He removed a small tool from his belt and began working on the lock, his bare fingers allowing him the precise tactile feedback needed for the delicate work. The lock clicked open just as his team reached him. "Impressive," murmured the sentry, watching Jack work without specialized equipment. "Basic training," Jack replied modestly. "Now comes the hard part." He cracked the hatch slightly, letting his ears and nose gather information his companion's sensors couldn't detect: the faint sound of movement, the subtle change in airflow, the smell of weapon discharge. All told him there were guards directly below, alert but not yet aware of their presence. Jack held up 3 fingers, then pointed down. His team understood. The signal: 3 enemies below. He then removed a small device from his belt, a flashbang grenade designed to temporarily overwhelm sensory systems, both biological and technological. With a quick motion, he opened the hatch, dropped the grenade, and closed it again. A muffled bang followed, and Jack immediately pulled the hatch open fully, dropping through the opening in one fluid movement. By the time his team followed with their powered descents, Jack had already neutralized all 3 guards. "North corridor, secure," he reported through his communicator. Moving to rendezvous with Brutos's team. As the 2 groups worked their way toward the central command room, the environmental conditions deteriorated further. The temperature continued to drop, and atmospheric pressure began fluctuating wildly, conditions that tested the limits of even the most advanced armor systems. "Environmental controls failing," reported one of the Blivian twins, their normally blue skin turning a distressed purple behind their face shield. "Suit integrity at 60% and falling." Several other team members reported similar issues. The extreme conditions were pushing their protective technology beyond designed parameters. Jack, meanwhile, showed signs of stress but remained fully functional, his body adapting naturally to each new environmental challenge. "Status update," Bruthos demanded as the 2 groups joined forces in a corridor near the command center. 5 team members at combat readiness, Kalara reported, her silver skin pulsing with strained patterns behind her protective gear. "Though my rest are at reduced capacity due to system failures." Bruthos turned to Jack, who was breathing heavily but showed remarkable composure despite his exposure to the harsh conditions. "And you, human?" Jack straightened his posture. 100% mission capable, sir." For the first time, something like respect showed in the Craxian's 4 eyes. "How are you calculating these tactical options so quickly without a combat computer?" he asked as they prepared for the final assault. Jack looked at him, genuinely puzzled. "I'm not calculating anything. This is just instinct." "Instinct?" The concept seemed foreign to Bruthos. "Humans evolved as pursuit predators," Jack explained, as he checked his weapon. "Before we had technology, we survived by outthinking and outlasting our prey. We're hardwired to assess threats and find opportunities in changing environments." The revelation sent a ripple through the team. Species that had evolved on safer worlds had developed technology to compensate for what they lacked biologically. Humans, by contrast, had evolved capabilities that technology could only approximate. In the command center monitoring the exercise, the implications were not lost on the senior officers. Commander Zilthrak leaned toward Director Drell. "I believe we may need to rethink our training protocols," he said quietly. The final objective, securing the command center and extracting a high-value asset, loomed before them. The remaining opposition still outnumbered them significantly. "Conventional approach will fail," stated Bruthos flatly, studying the tactical readouts from his armor's systems. For the first time in his military career, the Craxian squad leader showed uncertainty. Jack studied the layout one more time. His mind processed not just the visual information, but all the environmental cues his exposed body had gathered throughout the mission. Air currents suggesting hidden ventilation systems, subtle temperature variations indicating power sources, even the slight echo patterns that revealed the true dimensions of rooms beyond. "We don't need a conventional approach," Jack said with quiet confidence. "We need a Deathworlder approach." The team gathered around him as he began outlining his plan. Even Bruthos, who had initially dismissed the unarmored human, listened with growing appreciation. The plan was unorthodox by coalition standards, but its brilliance lay in how it leveraged both the advanced technology of the armored team members and the natural adaptability of the human. "The opposition expects us to rely on technology and follow standard tactical doctrine," Jack explained, "but they're not prepared for someone who can think beyond those limitations." As he finished outlining his strategy, a new alert sounded. The simulation parameters changed again. The temperature stabilized, but radiation levels began to rise. For most species, this would necessitate immediate evacuation or enhanced shielding. The armored team members received warnings on their displays as their protection systems adjusted to the new threat. Jack felt nothing. Human senses couldn't detect radiation, but he understood the danger. "How long until radiation reaches critical levels?" he asked. 20 minutes at most," Kalara replied, checking her suit readings. "After that, even our armor won't provide adequate protection." Jack nodded, his expression determined. "Then we have 20 minutes to complete the mission." Jack's plan was unorthodox by coalition standards, but perfectly suited to their situation. "The radiation will affect their sensors before it harms us," he explained to the team. "We can use that to our advantage." His strategy centered around exploiting environmental factors that their opponent's armor would struggle to compensate for. Jack had noticed the facility's fire suppression system during their approach, a standard design used throughout coalition space. "Bruthos, can your armor's power system generate an electromagnetic pulse?" Jack asked. The Craxian nodded. "Small range only. It would drain my reserves significantly." "Perfect," Jack continued. "Kalara, your species can generate bioluminescence, correct? Can you control the intensity?" The Aldebaran's skin flashed with patterns of surprise. "Yes, but how did you know that?" "I saw your skin patterns change throughout the mission," Jack explained. "If you can create a bright enough flash while Bruthos triggers the EMP, we can overload their visual sensors temporarily." Understanding dawned across the team. By combining these abilities with triggering the fire suppression system, they could create steam that would blind visual sensors while Jack could navigate through using his natural senses. "Conventional tactics rely too heavily on technology," Jack said. "Our advantage is unpredictability." The team moved into position. Bruthos and 2 others would attack the main entrance, drawing attention and resources. Kalara and 3 more would position near the side entrance, ready to create their diversionary flash. Jack and the remaining 3 would use the confusion to enter through a ventilation shaft he had identified, too small for anyone wearing bulky armor, but perfect for the unarmored human. As the radiation counter continued to climb, they launched the operation. Bruthos's team engaged the enemy directly, weapons fire echoing through the facility. When the opposition forces were fully committed to the defense, Jack gave the signal. Bruthos triggered his EMP, temporarily disrupting electronic systems in a small radius. Simultaneously, Kalara removed her helmet and released a brilliant flash of bioluminescence that overwhelmed visual sensors. Jack immediately shot out the fire suppression controls, and water began spraying throughout the facility, quickly turning to steam in the temperature-controlled environment. Chaos erupted as the opposition's technological advantages became liabilities. Their sensor systems struggled to compensate for the multiple environmental disruptions, providing confused and contradictory readings. Jack moved through the steam like a ghost, his human eyes adapting much faster than electronic sensors. He felt the warm moisture against his skin, used it to sense air currents that guided him through the blinding clouds. Within minutes, he had navigated to the command center's rear access and disabled the guards there without firing a shot. Rear entrance secured, he transmitted to the team. Move in now. The final extraction was textbook perfection. The team suffered no additional casualties while the opposition was thrown into disarray by tactics their combat computers couldn't predict. When Jack reached the high-value asset, a simulated dignitary in the central chamber, he found the guards disoriented and easily neutralized. Asset secured, Jack reported as he escorted the simulation figure toward extraction. Mission complete. As the team converged on the extraction point, Bruthos arrived with his group, his armor showing battle damage but still functional. The Craxian's 4 eyes studied Jack with newfound respect. Your tactics were unconventional, he admitted. But effective, Jack nodded in acknowledgement. Different problems required different solutions. The simulation ended abruptly, the harsh environment dissolving around them as they rematerialized in the training center. An unusual silence fell over the facility as both participants and observers processed what they had just witnessed. Jack, sweating but otherwise showing minimal signs of the ordeal, found himself the center of attention. Commander Zilthrak approached, his tall form moving with deliberate purpose. Other senior officers followed closely behind, their expressions varying from curiosity to barely concealed amazement. Lieutenant Mason, the commander's voice clicked through his translator. Your performance requires re-evaluation of our understanding of human capabilities. Jack stood at attention. Thank you, sir. I was simply applying standard Earth tactics. Director Drell was more direct. You've demonstrated that our reliance on protective systems may have created vulnerabilities we hadn't recognized. The implications extended beyond training exercises. Throughout Coalition space, military doctrine had evolved around the assumption that advanced technology was always superior to biological adaptation. Humans, and other Deathworlders, challenged this fundamental premise. The armor was never just physical. Jack explained later to a growing crowd of curious officers in the station's mess hall. The real limitation was conceptual, the belief that technology should always mediate your experience of reality. Kalara sat across from him, her environmental suit partially removed for the first time since he'd met her. Her silver skin pulsed, with patterns of thoughtful consideration. On my world, we've used protective technology for so long that we've forgotten what our bodies can naturally sense, she admitted. Watching you operate without armor was enlightening. In the days that followed, Jack found himself assigned to develop new training protocols that would incorporate Deathworlder tactical thinking. The Coalition leadership recognized the value of integrating these different approaches, rather than relying solely on technological solutions. Kalara became his most dedicated student, shedding portions of her protective gear to better understand how physical sensation informed battlefield awareness. Other species followed, each discovering capabilities that generations of technological dependence had allowed to atrophy. Start with small exposures, Jack advised, as he led a class of Coalition officers through basic sensory exercises. Your bodies remember what your ancestors knew, even if technology has let you forget. On the observation deck, Commander Zilthrak watched alongside Admiral Susan Rivera, the newly arrived human representative to the Coalition Defense Council. They're adapting quickly, noted the commander, mandibles clicking softly. Admiral Rivera nodded. That's what humans do best. But the real victory here isn't just proving our physical capabilities. Oh? The Versidian turned his compound eyes toward her. The real victory is that we're learning from each other. Your technology combined with our instincts will create something greater than either alone. As the training session below concluded, Jack dismissed his students, a mix of species, some still fully armored, others beginning to experiment with reduced protection. The integration was just beginning, but already the performance metrics showed promising improvements. Deathworlder doesn't mean better, Jack had told them. It just means different. Different evolutionary pressures create different strengths. What had begun as an individualistic display of human capability had transformed into something more important. A cross-species exchange that strengthened the Coalition as a whole. And as reports came in of improved combat readiness across mixed species units, The value of this integration became impossible to ignore. During the following month, Jack worked closely with Coalition engineers to develop new hybrid armor systems, designs that protected without isolating, that enhanced natural capabilities rather than replacing them. The prototypes incorporated feedback surfaces that transmitted environmental data directly to the wearer's skin, allowing even non-Deathworlders to benefit from more direct sensory input. The key is balance, Jack explained as he demonstrated the new designs. Protection where you need it, exposure where you don't. Let your body do what it evolved to do. Species with natural armor, like the Craxians, found they could reduce their reliance on powered exoskeletons. Those with enhanced senses, like the Aldebarans, discovered their natural abilities often surpassed technological replacements when properly trained. Bruthos, who had initially been Jack's harshest critic, became one of the strongest advocates for the new approach. For generations, we believed technology would make us invincible, the Craxian told a gathering of senior officers. The human showed us that true strength comes from adaptation, not isolation. In his private quarters, Jack recorded his weekly report to Earth Command. Initial resistance to Deathworlder methods has given way to cautious adoption. Recommend expanding the exchange program to include other human combat specialists. The Coalition is ready to learn what it means to think like a species that evolved fighting to survive. He paused, then added with a slight smile, "No armor needed." The transmission sent, Jack leaned back in his chair and considered how far they had come. What had started as a personal choice, to fight unarmored, had evolved into something much more significant. A fundamental shift in how the Coalition approached combat readiness. Commander Zilthrak had said it best during their last briefing. For too long, we've tried to overcome the universe's challenges by building walls between ourselves and reality. The human way, the Deathworlder way, teaches us to engage with those challenges directly, to adapt rather than hide. Outside his viewport, the stars of Proxima Centauri shone brightly.